Déjà vu is that strange, fleeting sensation that you've experienced a moment before. We've all felt it. Most dismiss it as a mental hiccup or mere coincidence. But sometimes it feels off, like reality is looping in ways it shouldn't. Here are 4 allegedly true tales of déjà vu that lingered, spiraling into something truly unsettling. I rarely share this with others because it sounds utterly unhinged, but an event in 2017 shook my grip on sanity and the fabric of reality itself. I was renting a rundown apartment in central New Jersey, a 3-story brick structure likely untouched since the late 80s, where the hallway lights hummed softly and every door bore chipped paint and odd locks. My roommate Nick, who worked night security at a warehouse outside town, left me alone most evenings. It was a Thursday night in early February when I returned home later than usual. Climbing the stairs, I was struck by a scent I hadn't encountered in years: burned rubber blended with citrus cleaner. That odor sparked a bizarre, alien memory. As I moved down the hall, déjà vu slammed into me like a freight train, not just a fleeting recognition but a vivid certainty that I'd lived this precise moment before. I halted 5 feet from my door, frozen. I knew what was coming. The light above would flicker twice. A woman downstairs would shout something garbled, then laugh, and a heavy, metallic thud would echo from the hall's end. It unfolded exactly as predicted, leaving me baffled rather than afraid. I wondered if I'd dreamed it. But the next night, while watching TV with leftover Chinese food, the sensation returned. I foresaw the dialogue, the ambient sounds, even a phone buzz from my nightstand. Over the next 5 days, these premonitions intensified. I started jotting them down, testing myself, and each prediction held true. Details like the exact time Nick would text or a neighbor's dog would bark, things I couldn't have known. Yet they weren't past memories. They felt like previews of unlived moments. Then the dream began. I saw myself in bed as the door opened. Nick entered, pale and sweating, saying, "There's someone in the building." His voice was flat, like a distorted recording. I asked who, but he only stared. That dream repeated nightly. On the final night, at 3:12 a.m., it wasn't a dream. Nick stood there, repeating those words. I grabbed a bat and followed him into the hall. He pointed to the stairwell. No one was there, but the shadows shifted unnaturally. We called the police. Nothing. I confessed the dreams to Nick. He stared back and said, "I've had them too." We fell silent. The déjà vu stopped that night, but since then, I occasionally sense a flicker, a memory, a sound, and wonder if I'm about to foresee something again. If that door opens and I hear those words, I'm not sure I'll follow. I've begun to suspect memories might be our minds tapping into timelines layered like peeling wallpaper, each faintly seeping into the next. Sometimes I think the hallway is a fragile rift between realities. I moved out 6 months later. I've driven past that building more than once, and each time, I feel a pull, like my body longs to enter. Part of me still believes something lingers at that hall's end, not a person or spirit, but a choice I haven't made in this life. And each time I dwell on it, I feel nearer to making it. My name is Ryan. This happened 3 years ago when I was 17 and my brother Chris was 19. We live in a quiet town encircled by woods. Not much goes on here, so kids like us get restless fast. There's a trail near our house that cuts into the forest. It stretches for miles. Folks say there are old structures and strange things buried deep in the trees, and we always talked about exploring it but never did until one weekend in October. We had nothing to do, and Chris suggested we finally check out the house he'd heard about from other kids at school. It was a chilly, overcast day. The leaves were turning colors, making it a pretty walk. We grabbed water and flashlights, told our mom we were hiking, and headed out around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun sets early in October, so we figured we had maybe 2 hours to go and return. The hike started off normal. It's not like I hadn't trekked these woods before. But after maybe 10 minutes, I started feeling off. It felt like I'd walked this exact trail before, like I recalled this specific stroll and chat with my brother. Even when we spotted a broken fence post on the path, I felt like I remembered that precise moment. But I'd never been down this trail before. I was certain of it. Chris was ahead of me rambling about something random, but I wasn't really listening at that point. I kept glancing around, and everything felt too familiar. I knew there'd be a thick tree with a big hole near the trail's edge. And 5 minutes later, we passed it. I didn't say anything out loud, like I've had déjà vu before. This time, it just felt oddly more intense. The deeper we went, the more memories surfaced. I started recalling a house, a 2-story place with green paint flaking off and a busted front step. I saw it clear in my mind. I remembered a shattered window on the top floor and dead vines climbing the side, but I'd never laid eyes on this house in real life. I didn't mention it to my brother yet though. We finally reached the house between 3:30 and 4 p.m. And when I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was the exact house I'd pictured in my head, down to nearly every detail. I just stared at it while Chris strolled toward the porch. I wanted to turn back and bolt. In that moment, I actually started wondering if I'd seen this house before, even though I was pretty sure I hadn't. I asked Chris if it felt familiar to him, and he looked confused and said no. Then he asked what I meant. I told him flat out I felt a weird sense of déjà vu about this exact moment. I didn't want to wimp out though, so we kept going. The front door was ajar, suggesting we weren't the first to have the bright idea of exploring this place. Chris pushed it open slowly, and it let out a long squeak as it moved. Inside, it smelled like you'd expect an abandoned house to smell, and the silence there was almost suffocating, like it pressed on my ears. We stepped in and saw broken furniture, old wallpaper peeling away, and a staircase climbing up on the left side of the room. We poked around the first floor for a while. There was a kitchen with no lights, a living room with a fireplace, and a hallway with one closed door at the end. The whole time, it felt like someone was watching us. At least to me it did. Chris made a remark that the place was kind of creepy, and I couldn't agree more. Then I blurted something without thinking. I said, "I remember being here before." Chris stopped walking and turned to me and said, "What do you mean?" I didn't even mean to say it. The words just slipped out on their own. I repeated myself. I said, "I remember this place, the kitchen, that hallway, even the fireplace. And I remember a woman upstairs." Chris's response was predictable, an instant assumption that I was trying to amp up the creepy vibe and spook him. I told him straight up, "I'm not trying to scare you. I just have a weird memory of being here and someone being upstairs." I could tell it creeped him out a bit, but I mean, in a setting like this, it's not hard to unsettle people. We stood there for a second. Then, we heard a noise, a soft creak, like a floorboard being stepped on. It came from upstairs. Chris looked at me and I looked at him. We didn't say anything for a few seconds. He dared me to go upstairs and check it out. I said, "Absolutely not," and suggested we get out of there. He somehow talked me into playing rock, paper, scissors to see who'd go up there and look. I lost, but I still refused to go up there. Chris still would rather explore upstairs than leave the house right then. As he climbed the stairs, each step creaked. I followed behind, but I stayed at the top of the stairs while he headed toward the room where the noise had seemed to come from. It was the last room on the right. The door was slightly open. He reached out and pushed it open more. I couldn't see what was inside from where I was standing, but Chris saw something in there. He froze and then out of nowhere, he screamed and nearly knocked me down the stairs. He yelled, "Run!" and we tore down the stairs and out the front door. We didn't stop running, not even when we hit the trail again. We kept going until we were totally out of breath. When we finally stopped, we were doubled over trying to breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear. "What did you see?" I asked. Chris looked at me and said, "There was a woman in there staring out the window like a statue." When I asked him what she looked like, he said all he really noticed was her hair, which was shoulder length and grayish blonde. He kept asking me how the hell I knew there'd be a woman up there. I accused him of lying to prank me, that he probably thought I was trying to scare him, so he turned it back on me, but he never backed down. He never said he was kidding. He insisted for days, weeks, months, even years later that he wasn't kidding. And he saw that woman in there. Part of me knows there's a chance he did flip what he thought was a prank back on me. But deep down, I believe him. We both heard that sound from upstairs. It came from someone or something alive. My déjà vu or premonitions or whatever you want to call it were also way too specific to be coincidental. I'm glad I wasn't the only one to peek into that room. This experience changed my definition of the term déjà vu. In 2020, during one of those odd in-between stretches of lockdown and reopened shops, I went through a period that felt less like reality and more like I was trapped in a scripted cycle I couldn't break. I was driving home late from my girlfriend's place, maybe 1:30 in the morning. It had just snowed, not a blizzard, but enough to make the roads icy. I live in a small town outside Scranton, Pennsylvania. And there's this one intersection near my house that's notorious for wrecks. It has 4 stop signs, but no lights, and on snowy nights, you have to pretty much guess if the other driver will respect them. As I neared the intersection, a heavy sensation settled in my chest. It wasn't fear at first, just a weird feeling of being displaced, like I had stepped into a moment I'd already experienced. I slowed down even though I had the right of way. Then, out of nowhere, a black pickup truck barreled through the stop sign on my left. If I hadn't braked early, it would have smashed right into my side. I pulled over, trembling, watching the taillights disappear into the snow. That would have killed me. I knew it. But what terrified me more was that I knew it was coming. Not in the way you sense danger. I mean, I remembered it. I recalled the details like the crunching metal and the glass and the airbag smashing my face. None of it occurred, but I remembered it like a truth. I brushed it off as stress. The pandemic, the isolation, whatever. But then a few nights later, I had another episode. I was at a red light and I remembered the song that would play on the radio before it did. I remembered the woman walking her dog across the street even though she wasn't in sight yet. I started to feel like I wasn't living in the now anymore, just replaying it. Then the dreams kicked in. Same road, same crash. Each night more intense. In one dream, I stepped out of the car and saw my own body slumped in the driver's seat with my eyes vacant and a deep gash across my temple. I could hear myself struggling to breathe. On the 5th night, I woke up drenched in sweat and decided I wouldn't take that route again. I drove 10 minutes out of the way and took the highway instead. Later that day, I got a text from a friend. There had been a fatal crash at that same intersection, same time I usually pass through it. Same make and color of my car. A different person, but the same outcome. Ever since then, I've wondered, was I recalling my own death in another timeline? Was some part of me diverted at the last second? Or was I just another version that got fortunate while another me didn't? I haven't had déjà vu like that since. But sometimes when I drive at night and the road looks too familiar, I get chills because maybe some part of me remembers something I'm not meant to. I later looked into near-death experiences and found people describing the same kind of thing. Memories of events that hadn't happened yet, only they always tied to a near brush with death. Maybe déjà vu is just a byproduct of slipping through the gaps. Maybe time isn't a line at all, but a constantly restarting loop, and occasionally something inside us recalls what happened before the reset. If that's true, then every time we dodge disaster, it might not be because of luck. It might be because we've already lived through it, and some part of us is desperately trying to prevent it from happening again. Before I worked in IT, I spent 2 years pulling overnight shifts at a long-term care home in upstate New York. It was an old building, a bit worn, but passable enough. We had a few residents with Alzheimer's or late-stage dementia, but most were steady, just elderly and in need of help. There was one woman named Miss Adelaide. She was 87, usually clear-headed, very kind, and kept to herself. She had a faded photo of a young boy on her nightstand that she called her grandson, but no one ever came to see her. Over the first few months, I settled into a routine. Midnight rounds, patient checks every hour. Most nights were quiet, but every so often I'd find Miss Adelaide awake, gazing at the ceiling, humming some slow, haunting melody. One night around 2:15 a.m., I found her sitting up, eyes wide open. When I asked if she needed anything, she said without blinking, "You already asked me that. You ask every night, but tonight is different." I felt this odd knot in my stomach, like she was reciting a script from my future. I chuckled nervously and offered her water. She refused and added, "You should remember this part." I told my supervisor, who waved it off as confusion or sleep talk. But the next night, I got the same response from her word for word. On the third night, she was gone. Passed in her sleep around 1:50 a.m. When I went to her room for rounds, the bed was freshly made and her things were already packed up. I couldn't stop mulling over what she said. I dug through old records and archived notes. Turns out another night staff member had noted similar things in her file from years back. Always at night around 2 a.m. She repeated phrases and predicted exact actions and even once named a new nurse before they introduced themselves. One entry from 2013 had her saying, "I remember this version. You take your break at 3:07. You always do." And according to the note, the nurse had just glanced at their watch. It was 3:07. I don't know what was going on with Miss Adelaide. I don't really buy into the paranormal, but it seemed to me that she was in some kind of loop or glitch. I can't really explain it, but it feels to me that maybe she was stuck, watching her life replay over and over, hoping for it to end differently. Now I work at a desk, but I still get the occasional wave of déjà vu. And when I do, I pause and listen because maybe it's not just a mind trick. Maybe it's a message. Maybe it's Miss Adelaide or someone like her reaching out across timelines trying to remind us we've been here before. And it didn't end well. I've since met people who worked at that same care home, years apart. And without me saying a word, they mentioned they used to have weird dreams at night while on the job. One even said a patient warned her she'd be fired soon, and then she was let go a week later due to cuts. She didn't recall the patient's name. I just nodded and said how interesting that was. I think about Miss Adelaide often, and sometimes when I'm drifting off, I hear that same haunting hum in my dreams. I can't help but still think about Miss Adelaide all the time.